Well, you already said this. There's one short lie. I have been I've been ahead of the department group. It's still there. I just retired, but I still haven't used to the. I'm still active, but I haven't used to being formally stopped there. What I'm when they ask me to explain about how it's dealt with, to give you advice, as in if you want to apply, I decided that how am I going to do this, and then I decided to give you a little bit of insight of how the process works within the panel. As you understand also from Patrick's, as I again, a very spot on synthesis of the work, there's no general scheme, there's just some guidelines, and I'll try to explain you how it's dealt with in the panel and hope that you can benefit from it. As I said, I've been in the ERC Grant panel, so all my experiences that I'm going to tell you are from this single panel. From discussions with other, I believe it's pretty, relevant for the other panels, but I haven't been in them. I've been there in 4 full cycles, 2018, 2024, and only the last of those two included an interview. I'm going to do a disclaimer in the end. Of course, the procedure is dynamic and there's slight changes from application cycle to application cycle, but I don't believe in general that's going to affect the decision making. First of all, I think it's important for you to realize the panel composition. Such a panel, and this is important when you write the proposal, it's very diverse and it's very heterogeneous. This is Europe. All regions of the continent need to be represented. All different backgrounds, especially in my panel, neuroscience is really broad. To give you an impression who's on the panel, I am a typical panel member, but many of the people that either have had an advanced grant or are in the process of applying could be a panel member. So when you write, reverse the situation, think, how would I judge this application? When you submit your proposal, make sure to go to the right panel. For some people, this is very easy. If you're in for instance, if you have a plain neuroscience, a novel mouse model going to study the brain, you're in neuroscience. But there's many projects that actually go along the boundaries, and that can be tricky if there's a proposal in your panel which is just outside of the scope of the panel. So if you're not sure, just go to the website of the EC. The panel members are there from the previous years, but you can also, basically the way the ERC works is that every cycle there's 2 people go out and 2 new people in principle with similar expertises go in. So it's definitely enough to get an idea of the expertise of the panel. You can just Google, PubMed the names, and then you see, hey, have these people experience with the type of project that I'm doing? The chair is announced in advance in each case, and I believe, but then that's the officials that can tell you that they're now publishing their whole panel before the end of the grant cycle. I'm not sure though. Anyway, so make sure, if you're in doubt, double check the panel. And then just to give you an impression how it works if you're in the commission. One short remark, there was just a discussion about a B1, so the first and the B2 stage. When I refer to pre-proposal, this is how the terminology we used to have in our panel. That's the B1 stage. The full proposal, the proposal is the B2 stage, just to make that clear. In our panel, we had like 100 proposals to start with. Please realize there's panels which go up to 250 proposals. It's huge. There are even panels with fewer, but this is just an example. And of course, it weren't exactly 100, but just to keep it simple. Your pre-proposal is going to be read by four panel members, of which one serves as a lead. So by definition, these are distributed, but as typically each one gets 25 panel members. Some of them typically lead, maybe very, very expert in your field, but the other ones may not be fully with you. They may not be experts in your specific area of key interest, so that puts a heavy burden on your proposal, because it's so competitive that all of them need to be convinced that this is a very good proposal and that you can do it. With here I touch on the feasibility aspect, that you can do it. I don't mean that it's all clear cut like a cooking book, but that there are some aspects of it that you cannot do with the current technologies, but you're going to develop technologies or methodologies to be able to do so. It has to be concise because it's a pre-proposal, but your problem should be should be clear, and it should be clear that you can do it. You don't have to work out the details in this stage of how you're going to do it, but you should convince the panel members that you can do it. Second point, quite often forgotten, I think, make the reviewer enthusiastic for your proposal. You worked on it for years. You thought about this for years. Please make sure this shines of your proposal, because then you feel, this is what I want to fund. I want to see the end results. Some more broader tip: the pre-proposal should outline your concept, but and in the same time make clear how you will execute the problems associated with the proposal. You don't have to, in the pre-proposal, to give the pure details at this stage, but the panel members must have the impression that you're able to carry out the project. Again, if you foresee hurdles, name them and say how you're gonna solve them. It doesn't have to be one solution, but it could be, I could try this. If this doesn't work, I'm going to try this. This doesn't work, try that. And then on the feasibility, ideas in the pre-proposal prevent us as purely novel, typically score above average, but only if the planner considers the plan realistic. Realistic is not the same as feasible. Typically, and an ERC grant is not like a national grant. If you have a national grant and everything is feasible, you still have a chance. If if everything is fairly feasible here, I mean directly feasible here, and there's no hurdles for the ERC, that's not what typical panel member wants. And it's not challenging enough in that case. How to circumvent this? Typically preliminary results. So I'm going to research for this, but I'm already 30% of the way. Look here, they can be extremely helpful in that respect. The preliminary results, they refer to my area, which is the life sciences. I'm not sure how relevant it is for other areas. Ideas that are conceived as a continuation of existing research projects of the applicant typically receive low scores. So if you work on a specific mouse species and has researched every aspect of it, and yet are going to deepen now the study of its tail, this is not what the typical panel member wants. If you're going to search for a new species, etc., maybe that's better. You get scores which are in the range of 1 to 5. Typically 1 and 2 are rare, so you get 3.5 up to 5. Typically a score of 4 or so is necessary to be allowed to the full proposal stage. Full proposal again is the B2 part, and then Patrick gave you an indication. He had a previous starter grant. This is not necessary. If you have any prestigious grant on your CV, that helps. But for instance, the route what some people think, oh, I have a starting grant, I have a consolidator. Now I'm going to get the advanced grant. That's not the case. As I said, it helps in that respect. ERC, previous ERC grants work just as well as any other prestigious grant. The CVs in the proposal. There's much debate on the CVs. It's imperative, with very few exceptions, to have an excellent to outstanding CV. Having said that, over the years, the relative contribution of the CV to the end score has diminished. When I started this, we gave CV scores and we gave proposal scores, and there was a 50-50 division on, sorry, both weighted just as well, and that to give you an average score that has been given up. So it you need to have an excellent to outstanding CV, but the score itself is only used. There's no longer. I mean, sorry, the proposals are ranked by proposal score, by project scores, and the CV is added on the side. What is relevant is that the CV is to judge if the applicant is able to carry out the project. If you've never worked on mice in your life and all the times on red, I'm not saying you can't do it, but then please make very clear in your proposal why you think you can work on rats. This makes a very strange impression. You see that sometimes people describing a novel technique and there isn't a single publication in that area. That doesn't make a good impression. And as I said, an outstanding CV by itself, there's amazing CVs there. Sometimes you get huge H indexes, way over 100, major last author papers in all the primary journals. But an outstanding CV by itself is not sufficient for a high panel score for the pre-proposal. So the application itself needs to be excellent. The pre-proposal session that ends with the ranking, if you had 100 proposal, imagine from 1 to 100, 1 the top. But grants that you consider fundable at that stage get an A score. The ones with minor flaws that the panel believes to be could work after some revisions get a B score. This is if you can give advices that you think, okay, these people work on 20 species of a certain animal or plant, just reduce it to 3, come to the nucleus, and rework it like that. You get those advice that you get B scores. Projects that are considered unrealistic in a way that you think, that the panel thinks, this is just not a good idea. I don't believe in it. It's too easy, too complicated. They get a C score. In our panel, C scores were relatively rare. And then the top 30 is invited. So about 30% is invited to submit a full proposal. Having said that, of course, you already did submit it. The projects that were submitted simultaneously will be read again by 4 panel members. Selected on expertises, but the readers are likely different from the pre-proposal. Again, there's one in the lead. So this means that you can have between 4, if the pre-proposal and proposal readers are the same, and 8 if they're completely different, which is rare. More typical is that you have about 6 readers with different expertises, interests, and opinions. Yet in the full proposal stage, realize this is very competitive. All projects at this stage are excellent. Yet all of those 6 people need to be convinced your project is outstanding. So what's there an advice? Again, I like Patrick's contribution. Pay a lot of attention to your idea. Have it read by people also slightly away from your your expertise, and pay attention to the tiniest details in your project. At this stage, the full proposal methods need to be described in great detail. It always has yeah, for the most challenging techniques or ratios, provide backups plans. And spare, not sure. Yeah, and on the a caveat here is that if you have technical, very technical hurdles, if you have to have those on the end of the project, some people will think, oh, this person can do it, some may not do it. But if that, you can get away with it, you can still get funded. If you do it, however, as the first work package, and your entire grant is dependent on something that you're not sure, you haven't convinced the audience, the panel members that you can do it, you're unlikely to pass because of the uncertainty that you can do the rest of the project. Make sure your proposal is a true ERC grants proposal. Think about a novel concept and present it as well. And again, proposals that do well in national competition. Sometimes you see something that looks like a resubmission or an adapted submission of a national grant. They typically don't do well in the ERC, again, because they're for national, it all has to be feasible for a national grant, whereas it's not the case for ERC. Again, present your idea, you're like on the verge discovering a new novel concept, but at the same time convince a panel you're able to carry this out. So, of course, it's typical, a balance between feasibility and novelty. If it's all novel, feasibility may go down too much. If it's all feasible, the novelty may go down. This is a tricky balance. So very good about talking about advisors. Follow your own intuition. I've seen people or heard of to the grapevine, people taking advice from grant advice from colleagues. And so, for instance, add sections to the project just to make it more attractive. And if some of them failed completely, I mean, your intuition is if you're think you can apply for an advanced grant. You're pretty far advanced, so your intuition has brought you at this stage. Keep it there. If you had previous submissions, pay attention to the comments made. The budget, it's simple. Be reasonable and fair. Be reasonable. If you want to try out a novel technique and you have no experience with it, don't say, oh, I'm going to hire a PhD student. Full stop. And they say, this I'm going to dedicate a postdoc on. Postdoc must have experience in this, and this. That's more convincing. Some funded projects have their budget worked out in great detail. This again reflects to the details. The budget itself, I have to add, is not scored. But somehow you see that the very best projects also have very well and worked out and realistic budgets. One remark that's not on the slide, you can ask for $1 million of extra funding. It's rarely given. Partially for fundamental reasons. Sometimes people ask for like a microscope or a novel sequencer, but if you ask, so you really have to convince the panel that that you're going to fill it for 100% of the time, which is usually not very feasible. And there's other, so don't count on it. This is what I want to say. Then there's external reviews. There were some discussions about that, some questions on them. Full stage proposal are sent out for review. who are we sending to? The panel flags the percentage of reviewers. There's an AI tool which helps you pick out reviewers, but unfortunately, if you're on the same expertise, it usually picks the same reviewers, at least a few of them for all of those projects. That doesn't work. So you use them for your own networks. Typically, you get 3, 4 reviews per proposal in our panel. Sometimes way more. I mean, they have to ask for like 12 reviewers to get the 3 or 4. Sometimes you do get the 7. Very, very rarely fewer. Actually, you always get a minimum of 3. Our staff there is very helpful. Reviews are, by definition, heterogeneous. Reviewers rarely see all techniques dealt with in the proposal. Reviews are dealt with. How are they dealt with? This is an important point. They're dealt with care and they are helpful, but they're never decisive. And again, this is different from a national grant. If you there you want all positive reviews. What you see here is that if you have a very challenging idea, some people will think, he can do it. And other people will say, well, I like the idea, but I don't think it's feasible. So mixed reviews sometimes get even higher priority scores than all A reviews. All B reviews are not very helpful here, of course. Full proposals are scored again in the range of 1 to 5, but there's very few ones. There's very few low scores here, but scores start anew. The interview, if you get there, you gotta prepare well. Obvious question. Make a serious, a little bit of a pleasant introduction. We're all sitting there in a hall, looking at the screen for full days. Sometimes there's works around, so just make it pleasant for the whole audience to learn. It should outline the concepts of your proposal. Some nice graphics help. Some topics are better for it than easy. And this is the whole goal here, is to get the non-readers of your proposal on board. Have a backup plan for technological projects. Log in on time. Be aware EDC handles Brussels time. Happens every time. People logging in on their right time. Sounds obvious, happens. How does it happen? The lead reader will start a discussion, typically followed by the co-readers and followed by panel members. Typically, time is short though, and also because it's online, it's more difficult as a panel member who's not involved to jump in and ask another question. So it's usually pretty strict. I like Patrick's advice: give a short, clear to the point answer, and if the panel member wants more information, he can ask. I think that's the best advice you can get. Questions proposed by specialist external reviewers. These are frequently asked, so these may go pretty much in detail. A poor interview reduces your chances dramatically. So be sure you're up to date with all the aspects of the proposal, even if you outsource some aspect. So, for instance, if you work with rodents, but you're not a rodent specialist himself, and the question is which you're supposed to use this and this type of mice. Do you think that's all right? If you then answer said, well, but my coworker is an expert, he can tell you all about it. That's not what the panel wants to hear. And although this seems like a minor error, again, be aware that it's very competitive. All the projects are excellent, so that pretty much reduces your chances. So even if you outsource aspects of your proposal, make sure they're yours. You master them. If you do them yourself, it's your project, and this should shine from the interview. And then the projects and interviews are discussed in the panel to come to consensus ranking. Final score of the 100, typically about 10 are selected directly, 1 or 2 on the waiting list. And the rest is bureaucracy. If not selected, pay attention to the comments from the revised submissions. If you submit, if you get an A score and are allowed to score again, to reapply just immediately the same the next round, be aware that the EC works with two parallel panels, so you may get an entirely different panel composition. So there, if you get, but this has been dealt an A score, you may reapply the following year. Not all A's are invited for an interview. With a B score, you skip 1 year. With a C score, you skip 3 years. And here's my disclaimer: the application process is dynamic, so please keep an eye on the website, especially because they're foreseeing an immense increase in publications. I think the two-step procedure has been adapted a little bit, but I don't think this will fundamentally change the way the panels work. And of course, keep an eye on the EC website. I left it in. This is my acknowledgement slide. Questions?
Okay, thank you very much, Frank, for your presentation. Then we will now start with the Q&A. And yeah, again, we have received some questions beforehand and some questions during the webinar, but I will start with the ones that we have received beforehand.
Sure.
So if you have just passed the stage of a consolidator grant, is it wise to apply for an advanced grant or wait a number of years to enhance the strength of your profile CV? And if so, what should be focused on?
Good point. First of all, is it wise? I don't think that there is. What matters is that you have a novel idea that you can work out well. If you already got, so that can be any stage. If you had one novel idea and already just obtained your consolidator grant with that, you probably first have to work that out before you can. I don't think anyone will believe that you then can work simultaneously with your grant. Is that the question? Sorry, was that the question? Whether you just had it or whether you just finalized it, the consolidator?
If a person has passed the stage of a consolidator grant.
Sorry, if you had to put consolidator. No, it all depends on whether you really have a novel idea. Whether you just passed the consolidator or not doesn't make sense. If you have a real novel idea, a novel concept that you can present, you can submit. But it has again to be novel and not a continuation of your consolidator, because that's usually not very well appreciated. And then what should you focus on your CV? It's always the same. Good publications, even though you're no longer allowed to judge your CV on the impact factor. The impact of one publication is higher than the impact of another one. Some activities, prestigious invitations, they count very heavily, and quite often in the very best CVs, you see a combination of them, because it's in a way it's a sort of a circle, because if you have prestigious publications, you get more invitations than the other way around.
Okay, then we go to the next question. My research typically requires input from a computational collaborator. Is the fact that I'm dependent on somebody else a negative factor with an ERC application?
Yeah. So this is the question is, I'm dependent on somebody else's expertise. It's a good point. And the answer, I just gave it maybe at the end of my presentation. If you write an ERC, it should be I. It's your project, so you should be able to do it. So you should write it as if you master that computational or if you master that computational technology. Of course, there's no problem in saying, this person will help me. But it should be clear from the this is a serious caveat. If the panel thinks, but you're dependent on this person. What if this person gets another job? I mean, he's not funded by the ERC. What if this person gets another job, um, and leaves? Then you're not going to do it. Then you have a problem. Again, with the interview, if they ask questions about that specific computational methodology, you're supposed to ask them yourself and not say, hey, my colleague will answer that. That's not going to work. Of course, there's a difference because that's not clear from the question. If it's just the colleague next to who is not in the ERC, you have to write very carefully and make sure you master the techniques. If you can get him on your grant, that might help a bit, because then he or she is part of the application itself.
Okay, then we go to the next question. How do you measure excellence in the CV of mature women researchers with non-linear careers due to family choices, but with indication of recent leadership, MSCA grant, participation in a diversity of international projects, publications?
Yeah, it's a good question. First of all, if you see a CV, for instance, there's two people and both worked for 20 years, and one had some interruption, you try to estimate, say, hey, maybe I should compare this person with another person of 20 years experience. He missed just like 2 years, 3 years, so I should compare more with somebody with like 17 years of expertise. This is the general feeling, which was around, at least in my panel. It's not a written rule. It's not like, it's not a one-to-one equation. But what I can add to there, that if you have a very good CV, readership, recent publications, as I said, all the CVs are excellent to outstanding. Once you have an excellent or outstanding CV, that's fine. And you're still very eligible. If you write a good project, you're still very eligible and unlikely to be placed beyond someone who has, a few publications more, because he didn't have those interruptions.
Okay, then we go to another question, which is kind of similar in a way, but it comes from an SSH researcher. And regarding the assessment of the PI, how a capacity to successfully execute the project is evaluated in case the PI has followed a non-linear career path. For example, if the PI has led researchers in alternative institutional settings, such as a national research organization, but has not formally headed a research team, would this be considered sufficient?
Good point. I can only speak what it was. Please realize that it's very competitive at this stage. So it all has to. What the panel asks is this a V? When you judge a project, you think, I like the project, but then you look at the CV and think, can this person do it? Not having led a research group is not an advantage at this stage. So you really have to, again, it's difficult to say this is not feasible, but when you write in your CV or somewhere in your application, you will have to explain why you think you have to convince the panel why you can do it. I think it's different here because this is an SH panel, so it's more social sciences. You may have a better chance there. If it's in exact sciences, I mean, people that can't remember having had any full proposal applications with people that didn't have a lab before. But this is we typically steer wet labs, and you can't just come out of the dry lab and say, hey, I'm going to steer a wet lab. That's hard to convince people there. If you're in social sciences, maybe, but again, argue why you made this step. That's the most that's the most important there, and have it read by other people. Do you think this is believable? Again, the panel members. It's most of the people are online, could well be in the panel, or maybe will be in the panel at some stage.
Okay, thanks. Then we go to the next question. Following up on the previous question and answer to that, what is meant by getting a colleague on your grant?
Getting a colleague on your grant. No, it was about if there's an expertise, there's one PI. No way you can get the applicant is responsible 100%. The previous question was if I'm dependent on someone's computational expertise. I think there's a difference if it's your colleague, you can just who has a different sort of he works at your university, but you have no control over. You can mention him as a collaborator, but of course, if you're in the panel, you think, is this person going to stay, or is he not going to stay? There's no control. If this is at the postdoc level, you can say, I hire this person to bring in certain expertise. There you have a better chance. But you can't get someone on your grant. Maybe I was a bit of a slip of the tongue. No, the PI can apply for the grant, but you can mention anyone as a collaborator that may be helpful. And you can take people with different expertises. You can write them in your grant in the budget, say, hey, I'm going to hire this postdoc.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we go to the next question. I guess every proposer claims to be groundbreaker, not incremental. How do
Yes.
evaluators decide whether a proposal is truly groundbreaking or not, especially at stage 1, when the evaluators are not expert in the topic proposed? I looked at a list of stage 1 previous evaluators, but none of them are close to my field.
Yeah. How do you decide if it's groundbreaking? That's of course subjective, because you see there's a lot. If you get 100 proposals, there's usually one or two, sometimes two, that you think that everybody sees this is groundbreaking. Bang, there we are. There's no doubt about it. There's one or two that you think this no way, but then the rest of them is just on a gradual scale. So you look at that. Is this really start from a novel concept? That's basically what you look at. But again, this is subjective, and also not everybody has the same. Give it to 100 people, not everybody will score this as high on the groundbreaking scale. So the challenge for a pre-proposal is to write it in such a way that everybody will, even the 4 panel members will score it as groundbreaking. So it should be accessible at one stage. Everybody should be able to read it. People read up to 25, in some panels up to 50 pre-proposals. So if your pre-proposal requires reading it 3 times before you understand what it's about, you may not get there. I mean, it should be, but there's no guarantee. Of course, we're all people. These are huge amounts of text, and everything is new. So make it attractive, make it and again, make it. If you're enthusiastic about the proposal, make it shine from your proposal that you're enthusiastic. So that's it. There's no such thing as a scale for groundbreakingness or something.
Okay, thank you. Then I see we have 2 questions left, so I will start with the first one. What if the novel idea on which the proposal is built sits between 2 different panels?
Yeah, good point. You can only submit in one panel. You can ask for additional expertise in another panel. Sometimes, so then you get a reviewer. Sometimes you get to ask as a panel, for instance, in panel LS5, can you also comment on this proposal from panel SH so and so? The effect may be limited. What you could do, but I'm not sure. I think you have to ask it with the formality. Perhaps you could contact, but I'm not sure this is allowed. You could potentially contact the panel chairs what they recommend. Just write to them both, but I'm not sure. You're not allowed to yeah, not as an advice, but just which panel should I discuss this in? I'm not sure that's allowed though, because you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to go to a panel member. No, but just to ask. I think that happened in the past, but I'm not sure. So you have to ask the ERC there directly.
Yeah, it's probably best to not go via the panel members then, but via
No, not for the member,
the
the
agency.
chair. The
Yes,
chair,
yeah.
or maybe no, that's the best advice. Maybe send the request to the ERC contact person and say these are the chairs I'm doubting between these, because it's very frustrating when you're in a panel and you're dealing with a project that in retrospect after thorough reading you think this doesn't belong here. And the panel chairs are very upset. It makes the panel chairs very upset because they're formally responsible for the selection of they are allowed to change between projects, but in practice it rarely happens. So yeah, that's the better advice. Go to the national representative or to the ERC directly and explain your problem. I'm sure they're able to help you
Yeah, yeah.
because
And
it's
of course, yeah, of
yeah
course, the support offices in the host institutions can definitely help out with that as
yeah
well.
yeah.
Then we go to the last question. Does having a patent on a demonstrated concept and proposing its implementation get a better evaluation due to higher feasibility, or would it be considered old and not novel enough?
Yeah, it doesn't help. Uh, If you have but a patent can be in all stages. I mean, if you have the patent for completely new machine and basically you have already a scheme how to build it. It won't probably not be considered novel enough. If you have a patent on just an idea and you're going to work it out, I don't think that's a problem for the ERC panel. Be fair, make it clear, make your point, and also explain why you want, that the ERC will go for the scientific part, for the scientific challenge, and not for the patent is for the commercial side. Make sure that the scientific part of the project it shines.